When we first arrived at Earth, we felt unstoppable. Our fleet had conquered world after world without resistance that could challenge us. We believed Earth would be no different. A backwater planet, full of unremarkable lifeforms, a species barely out of its infancy compared to the empires we'd subjugated. The atmosphere in the command deck was almost celebratory as we discussed the invasion plans. We would land, overwhelm the humans with our advanced technology, and claim the planet as ours. After all, what threat could a primitive, disorganized species possibly pose? In our eyes, they were a minor obstacle, a simple problem to be solved, and nothing more. We didn't expect much from them. They hadn't mastered interstellar travel, and our intelligence reports labeled them as a war-torn, divided species. It seemed laughable. The only real discussion among us was how long the invasion would take. Days, maybe weeks at most. As the first ships descended, I remember watching from the observation deck, feeling a smug certainty that we'd be victorious. Earth was just another conquest. When our landing forces touched down, the initial results confirmed our confidence. We spread our troops across their very terrains, deserts, forests, cities, and witnessed humans fleeing at the sight of our advanced machinery. It was amusing, almost pitiful, how they ran. Our commanders predicted their quick surrender, believing their will to resist would crumble under the might of our superior forces. For a few hours, it seemed as though we were right. Our forces advanced without much resistance, taking key positions as humans scattered in panic. But then, something changed. Supply lines began failing, communications were disrupted, and entire patrols started disappearing without a trace. At first, we thought it was sabotage from within our ranks. Maybe a few humans had infiltrated our systems. We conducted internal investigations, but found nothing. It became apparent that these disruptions were external, deliberate. The humans, the very ones we had dismissed as weak, were doing this. Their disorganized chaos, it seemed, wasn't weakness but strategy. And we weren't prepared for it. The humans weren't engaging us in open battle, at least not in the way we had anticipated. Instead, they used their terrain, their knowledge of the planet, to strike at us when we least expected it. Convoys moving supplies between outposts were ambushed in dense forests, their vehicles destroyed before they could even call for help. In the sprawling cities, where we thought our forces could dominate, humans turned the streets into traps. They would strike from hidden positions, disappear into underground tunnels, and leave entire platoons stranded in dead zones where our technology couldn't function. We began to lose soldiers rapidly. Not in large, glorious battles, but in small, infuriatingly clever strikes. Guerrilla tactics. A concept we were familiar with but had never faced at this scale. Every step forward became a struggle, every advance met with more resistance than we thought possible. And their ingenuity, it was terrifying. They weren't afraid to use unconventional methods. They'd collapse entire buildings to block our path, flood tunnels to cut off our retreats, and use the environment itself as a weapon. They didn't have our technology, but they didn't need it. They adapted, quickly and brutally, to every move we made. What we had first seen as human disorganization was, in fact, a method of warfare we hadn't anticipated. They fought in ways that our generals couldn't predict, and it frustrated them. It frustrated all of us. Our advanced machinery and precision weaponry were rendered almost useless in the face of their unpredictability. It wasn't just the physical attacks, they struck at us mentally, too. Human forces didn't just break down our supply lines or ambush our soldiers. They attacked our minds. Psychological warfare became another front in the battle we were losing. Broadcasts would interrupt our communications, strange, eerie messages that seemed to come from nowhere. They would taunt us, reminding us that we were invaders, that this was their home, and that they would never stop fighting. They spread false information among our ranks, sowing distrust and fear. There were times when units would turn on each other, convinced there were traitors within. Their tactics made us paranoid. Our once confident commanders, who had so easily dismissed the human threat, were now second-guessing every decision. The humans had turned the invasion into a nightmare. We didn't know where the next attack would come from or who among us might fall victim to their strategies. Even at night, when we tried to regroup and rest, we felt their presence. They knew the land. We didn't. We were aliens here, and they made sure we never forgot it. Our confidence, our arrogance, unraveled slowly. What had begun as an assured conquest was now a desperate struggle to maintain control. Each day brought new losses, new humiliations. And all the while, the humans remained elusive, striking from the shadows, never giving us the satisfaction of a direct confrontation. We had come expecting an easy victory, but what we faced was something far more terrifying. Humans weren't just a primitive species, they were something far more dangerous, adaptable, relentless, and willing to do whatever it took to defend their planet. And as the days dragged on, it became clear that they had no intention of letting us win. In fact, they were just getting started. There was a moment in the war when we truly believed victory was within our grasp. We had concentrated our forces on a human city, planning a final, overwhelming strike to break their resistance. Our commanders saw it as a decisive moment. The city would fall, and with it, the will of humanity. We had prepared for a standard assault, expecting to wipe out whatever defenses they had left and claim the city as ours. But what awaited us was nothing like what we had anticipated. When our forces moved in, we quickly realized we were walking into a trap. The city had been fortified, but not in any traditional sense. They had turned the entire place into a maze of death. Hidden explosives were rigged throughout the streets, sniper positions were set up in every conceivable vantage point, and every alleyway and corner was a potential choke point. The humans had thought through every detail, anticipating our every move. Our soldiers fell by the dozens as buildings collapsed on top of them, explosions rocked our armored vehicles, and snipers took out key officers before we could even locate their positions. We were being decimated, and no amount of superior firepower could save us from the chaos they had engineered. The survivors, what few there were, retreated in complete disarray. The once well-coordinated and confident forces were reduced to frightened groups, barely managing to regroup outside the city's perimeter. It was in that moment that we, as a species, began to understand humans were not prey. They weren't the passive species we had expected them to be. They were predators, willing to use every advantage, every tool at their disposal, no matter how brutal or unconventional. We had thought we were the hunters, but in truth, we were the ones being hunted. The humans didn't stop there. As the war dragged on, they became more organized, more deliberate in their methods. They used every part of their planet as a weapon against us. In the dense jungles, they would strike and disappear, blending into the environment so seamlessly that our scanners often couldn't detect them. Soldiers would vanish without a trace, leaving only the eerie silence of the forest behind. In the deserts, they weaponized the very elements, sandstorms that we couldn't predict, extreme heat that disrupted our equipment. They knew their planet better than we ever could, and they adapted far faster than we expected. Their ability to turn Earth itself against us was something we could never have prepared for. We watched in awe and fear as they used the terrain to their advantage in ways we couldn't counter. Mountains became fortresses, rivers became barriers, and cities became traps. It wasn't just their technology or their weapons, it was their understanding of survival, of using every part of their environment to its fullest potential. It became clear to us that we weren't fighting a conventional enemy. We were fighting a species that knew how to survive, and they were doing it far better than we could. As casualties mounted, desperation began to spread among our ranks. The initial confidence we had in our overwhelming technological superiority had eroded, replaced by a growing fear of the invisible enemy lurking in every shadow. Communication began to break down. The humans had become experts at targeting our supply lines, cutting off our resources, and sabotaging any efforts to regroup. Supply drops went missing, and key outposts were overrun in the dead of night, their occupants gone before reinforcements could arrive. With every day, the panic grew. We no longer trusted the ground beneath our feet. Soldiers who had once marched proudly into battle now moved with hesitation, scanning every inch of the terrain for the next ambush. Morale plummeted. The once disciplined ranks of our forces began to fracture as stories of human attacks circulated, each one more terrifying than the last. The human resistance had become more than just an enemy, they were a force of nature, something we could neither predict nor defeat. The breaking point came when we received a transmission that would haunt us for the rest of our lives. A human broadcast, transmitted to all our ships and ground forces. The message was simple, but it struck at the core of everything we had feared. This is our home. We will never stop fighting for it. It wasn't a threat, not in the way we understood threats. It was a declaration. A statement of defiance, yes, but more than that, a promise. They were telling us that no matter how long it took, no matter the cost, they would resist. Forever, if they had to. It was in that moment that the full weight of our failure became clear. We hadn't just underestimated their military strength, we had underestimated the human spirit itself. They weren't just fighting for survival, they were fighting for their home, and that gave them a power we couldn't match. We had come to conquer, but we had instead ignited something far more dangerous, a relentless will to defend what was theirs. And we had no way to break it. As the final echoes of the human transmission faded from our comms, the realization settled in. The invasion had failed. There would be no victory for us here, no glorious conquest. We had underestimated them at every turn, and now we were paying the price. In our arrogance, we had thought ourselves invincible, but humanity had shown us otherwise. And there was no turning back. Looking back, I regret ever setting foot on that planet. We had thought we could crush them with ease, but in truth, we had only awakened a sleeping giant. Now, all I can do is warn others, pray that they never make the same mistake. Because if you ever face the humans, if you ever dare to challenge them on their home soil, you will not walk away unscathed. You will not win.as the losses mounted and our forces continued to collapse under the relentless human resistance. The leadership of our invasion force descended into chaos. What had begun as a carefully orchestrated campaign quickly unraveled into a desperate scramble for survival. The once proud and confident commanders, who had spoken so casually of our inevitable victory, now huddled together in frantic meetings, their faces betraying the fear that had taken root in their hearts. There was no clear path forward. Every strategy we devised was met with human ingenuity that seemed to anticipate our moves before we made them. The debates among the leadership grew heated. Some argued that we should press on, that retreat was not an option for an empire as vast and powerful as ours. Others, more in tune with the reality of our situation, knew that continuing the fight would only lead to further destruction. But even they didn't have the courage to speak openly about retreat. It would mean admitting we had lost, admitting that the humans had not only beaten us physically but mentally as well. The humans had outwitted us at every turn. Their resistance was more than just tactics, it was an embodiment of their unbreakable will. Our technology, our strategies, all the things that had made us the most feared empire in the galaxy, were rendered useless in the face of their adaptability. The commanders became paralyzed, unable to make decisive decisions. In the end, their hesitation proved fatal. Small mistakes compounded into larger ones, and before long, we were no longer discussing victory, we were debating how to survive. The human resistance had done more than just stall our invasion. They had driven us into disarray, shattering the very core of our leadership. But the humans weren't finished. It wasn't enough for them to simply push us back, they turned our own arrogance against us. For so long, we had believed that our technology was unmatched, that no other species in the galaxy could ever come close to our level of advancement. Yet in their desperation, the humans found ways to use that very technology to their advantage. We underestimated their capacity to learn, to adapt, and to innovate. It wasn't long before we realized they had hacked into our systems, manipulating our weapons and communications to serve their purposes. It was a sobering realization. What we had seen as our greatest strength had been turned into our greatest vulnerability. I remember the shock among our forces when reports came in of human soldiers using our own tech against us. Earth scientists had reverse-engineered our equipment, quickly developing countermeasures that made our once formidable weapons obsolete. Our advanced targeting systems were disrupted, our communication networks infiltrated. It was as if every move we made was being watched, and every tool we used was being twisted into a weapon against us. The humans had proven not only capable of fighting back but of surpassing us. In a matter of weeks, they went from being the hunted to becoming the hunters, and we were left scrambling to defend ourselves from the very weapons we had brought to their planet. The retreat was inevitable, though none of us wanted to admit it. What had once been a mighty and imposing fleet, feared across the galaxy, was now in disarray, limping away from Earth in disgrace. Ships evacuated in panic, leaving behind their dead and wounded. There was no honor in our withdrawal, no sense of dignity or order. We fled because we had no choice. The humans had defeated us, not in some grand battle but through a series of relentless, unyielding strikes that left us battered and broken. I still see the image in my mind, our fleet, once a symbol of our empire's dominance, reduced to a scattered group of retreating ships, barely able to maintain formation as we fled the planet. The silence on the command deck was deafening. We knew we had been bested by a species we had considered inferior. The shame of it was unbearable. We had thought ourselves invincible, but the humans had shown us otherwise. They had taken everything we threw at them and turned it against us. In the end, we weren't the conquerors. We were the ones who had been conquered. The defeat at Earth became a forbidden topic among our people. It was too painful, too humiliating to acknowledge. Official records were altered, and the true story of the invasion was buried. Only whispers remained, passed down through those who had survived. Future generations would hear the tale, but only as a cautionary story, stripped of its full detail. The message, however, remained clear: never underestimate humanity. They were not to be trifled with, not to be provoked. As the years passed, I watched our empire continue, but the defeat at Earth never left me. It haunted me, even as an elder, when most others had tried to forget. I couldn't forget. I had seen what the humans were capable of, and I feared what they might become. They had already proven themselves to be a force unlike anything we had encountered. What would happen if they continued to grow, to expand beyond their homeworld? The humans we fought were just the beginning. I knew that in my core. Their victory over us was not just a moment in history. It was the first chapter in something far greater. I could only hope that our people would remember the lesson we had learned the hard way. Humanity was not to be underestimated, and if provoked again, they would unleash a force that the galaxy might not survive. For us, the defeat on Earth was more than just the loss of a battle. It was the loss of our pride, our certainty, and our sense of superiority. The humans had taken everything we believed about ourselves and shattered it. And in doing so, they had left a wound on our empire that would never fully heal. It's been many years since the invasion, and in all that time, we've never dared come close to Earth again. We've kept our distance, watching from afar as humanity grew, expanded, and evolved. The fear of them still lingers among us, a fear so deeply embedded that no one dares to speak openly of it. We became careful in our exploration, avoiding any star system where humans might have a presence. Our empire, once unchallenged, is now wary of even the smallest chance of encountering them. Over the years, we've seen glimpses of what humanity has become. At first, they stayed close to their home system, rebuilding from the damage we had inflicted. But they didn't stay confined for long. Slowly, methodically, they began to spread. New colonies appeared on distant worlds, and their ships, sleek, advanced, far beyond what we had seen during the invasion, started exploring the galaxy. Every report that reached us only confirmed what we feared. Humanity was no longer the species we had once encountered. They were stronger, more advanced, and far more mysterious. There was always a sense of unease when we heard of their progress. Our people couldn't shake the feeling that we had set something in motion, something we no longer had any control over. We had underestimated them once, and it had nearly destroyed us. Now, as we watched them grow, that fear remained. It was no longer just about their military strength. It was about what they might become. What were they capable of now? How far had their power extended? We didn't know, and that uncertainty was terrifying. Whispers began to spread among the galaxy's other species. Stories, rumors, tales of encounters with human forces that were unlike anything anyone had seen before. Some said their fleets were near invincible, equipped with technology that could bend space and time. Others spoke of humans manipulating the fabric of reality itself, able to appear and disappear at will, as if the very laws of physics had become tools for them to wield. There were stories of entire alien armadas vanishing without a trace after encountering a single human ship. And while none of these tales could be confirmed, the fear they instilled was undeniable. Whether or not these rumors were true didn't matter. The fear of what humanity might have become was real, and it had spread throughout the galaxy. Species that once looked down on humans, who had scoffed at their primitive beginnings, now spoke of them in hushed tones. They were no longer a species to be trifled with. What frightened us most wasn't the technology or the power, it was the possibility that they had surpassed us in ways we couldn't even comprehend. We weren't the only ones watching them from the shadows. Many other species kept a close eye on humanity, curious but wary. The humans had built alliances, forged trade routes, but there was always something beneath the surface, a silent understanding that they were far more dangerous than they appeared. Some still laughed at the idea of humans being a threat, dismissing them as a minor player in the grand scheme of the galaxy. But those of us who had seen what they were capable of, who had lived through the invasion, knew the truth. Humanity's potential for destruction was limitless. If they were ever provoked again, the galaxy might not survive. I've spent years warning anyone who would listen, but few take me seriously. They laugh, just as we once did, dismissing humans as nothing more than a minor annoyance. But I know better. We all know better, those of us who were there. We saw what they could do when they were pushed to the brink, and now they are far more powerful than they ever were. There's an old saying among our people: beware the sleeping giant. Humanity, I believe, is that giant. We thought we could conquer them, that they were no match for our empire. But we were wrong, and we paid the price. Now they are awake, and there's no telling what they might do if challenged again. The galaxy may be vast, filled with countless species and civilizations, but none of them should ever make the mistake we did. None of them should provoke humanity. In the end, I hope none of you ever meet a human. I hope you never find yourself on the wrong side of their power, as we did. The humans we fought so long ago were just the beginning, just the first step in their journey towards something far greater. If you ever face them, you won't be facing a species simply trying to survive. You'll be facing a force that knows exactly what it's capable of and isn't afraid to unleash it. They may seem distant, indifferent even, but don't be fooled. Beneath their calm exterior lies the same relentless will that drove them to defeat us. If you ever cross them, if you ever think for a moment that you can challenge them and win, you will suffer the same fate we did, if not worse. Humanity has grown far beyond what we ever imagined, and now, all I can do is hope that no one else makes the same mistake we did. In my heart, I know what they're capable of. I've seen it firsthand. And now, as I look to the future, I fear that if the galaxy ever pushes them too far again, there will be no turning back. They will rise, and they will conquer. And this time, there will be nothing left in their wake. So if you're wise, you'll heed my warning: never provoke humanity. Never underestimate them. Because if you do, you will face a fate far worse than anything you can imagine.